Bleak House by Charles Dickens, Chapter 46, Stop Him. Darkness rests upon Tom all Alone's, dilating and dilating since the sun went down last night. It has gradually swelled until it fills every void in the place. For a time there were some dungeon lights burning, as the lamp of life burns in Tom all Alone's heavily, heavily, in the nauseous air, and winking at many horrible things, but they are blotted out. The moon has eyed Tom with a dull, cold stare, as admitting some puny emulation of herself in his desert region, unfit for life and blasted by volcanic fires. But she has passed on. Tom all Alone's is fast asleep. It is a moot point whether Tom all Alone's be uglier by day or by night, but on the argument that the more that is seen of it, the more shocking it must be, day carries it. The day begins to break now. A brown, sunburnt gentleman who appears in some inaptitude for sleep, to be wandering abroad rather than counting the hours on a restless pillow, strolls hitherward at this quiet time. Attracted by curiosity, he often pauses and looks about him, up and down the miserable byways. Nor is he merely curious, for in his bright dark eye there is compassionate interest, and as he looks here and there, he seems to understand such wretchedness, and to have studied it before. No waking creature save himself appears, except in one direction, where he sees the solitary figure of a woman sitting on a doorstep. He walks that way. Approaching, he observes that she has journeyed a long distance, and is footsore and travel-stained. She sits on the doorstep in the manner of one who is waiting, with her elbow on her knee and her head upon her hand. Beside her is a canvas bag or bundle she has carried. She is dozing, probably, for she gives no heed to his steps as he comes toward her. The broken footway is so narrow that when Alan Woodcourt comes to where the woman sits, he has to turn into the road to pass her. Looking down at her feet, his eye meets hers, and he stops. "What's the matter?" "Nothing, sir." "Can't you make them hear? Do you want to be let in?" "I'm waiting till they get up at another house, a lodging house, not here," the woman patiently returns. "I'm waiting here because there will be sun here presently to warm me." "I am afraid you are tired. I am sorry to see you sitting in the street." "Thank you, sir, it don't matter." A habit in him, speaking to the poor and avoiding patronage or condescension, has put him on good terms with the woman easily. "Let me look at your forehead," he says, bending down. "I am a doctor, don't be afraid. I wouldn't hurt you for the world." He knows that by touching her with his skillful and accustomed hand, he can soothe her yet more readily. "Aye, a bad bruise and the skin sadly broken. This must be very sore." "It do ache a little, sir," returns the woman. "Let me try to make it more comfortable. My handkerchief won't hurt you." "Oh dear, no, sir, I'm sure of that." He cleanses the injured place and dries it, and, having carefully examined it and gently pressed it with the palm of his hand, takes a small case from his pocket, dresses it, and binds it up. While he is thus employed, he says, "And so your husband is a brickmaker?" "How do you know that, sir?" asks the woman, astonished. "Why, I suppose so, from the colour of the clay upon your bag and on your dress. And I know brickmakers go about working at piecework in different places, and I am sorry to say I have known them, cruel to their wives, too." "Where is he now?" "He got into trouble last night, sir, but he'll look for me at the lodging house." "He will get into worse trouble if he often misuses his large and heavy hand, as he has misused it here. But you forgive him, brutal as he is, and I say no more of him, except that I wish he deserved it. You have no young child?" The woman shakes her head. "One as I calls mine, sir, but it's Liz's." "Your own is dead, I see, poor little thing." By this time he has finished putting up his case. He is finished and is putting up his case. "I suppose you have some settled home? Is it far from here?" He looks good-humouredly, making light of what he has done, and she gets up and curtsies. "It's a good 23 miles from here, sir, at St. Albans. You know St. Albans, sir?" "Yes, I know something of it. And now I will ask you a question in return. Have you money for your lodging?" "Yes, sir," she says, "really and truly," and she shows it. He tells her in acknowledgment of her many subdued thanks that she is very welcome, gives her good day, and walks away. Tom all Alone's is still asleep, and nothing is astir. Yet something is. He retraces his way to the point from which he descried the woman at a distance, Sitting on the step, he sees a ragged figure coming very cautiously along, crouching close to the soiled walls and furtively thrusting a hand before it. It is the figure of a youth whose face is hollow and whose eyes have an emaciated glare. He is so intent on getting along unseen that even the apparition of a stranger in whole garments, does not tempt him to look back. He shades his face with his ragged elbow as he passes on the other side of the way, and goes shrinking and creeping on with his anxious hand before him and his shapeless clothes hanging in shreds. Alan Woodcourt pauses to look after him and note all this with a shadowy belief that he has seen the boy before. He cannot recall how or where, but there is some association in his mind with such a form. He imagines that he must have seen it in some hospital or refuge. He is gradually emerging from Tom All Alone's in the morning light, thinking about it, when he hears running feet behind him, and looking round, sees the boy scouting toward him at great speed, followed by the woman. "Stop him! Stop him!" cries the woman, almost breathless. "Stop him, sir!" He darts across the road into the boy's path, but the boy is quicker than he, makes a curve, ducks, dives under his hands, comes up half a dozen yards beyond him, and scours away again. Still the woman follows, crying, "Stop him! Sir, pray stop him!" Alan, not knowing but that he has just robbed her of her money, follows in chase, and runs so hard that he runs the boy down a dozen times, but each time he repeats the curve, the duck, the dive, and scours away again. To strike at him, or on any of these occasions, would be to fell and disable him, but the pursuer cannot resolve to do that, and so the grimly ridiculous pursuit continues. At last the fugitive, hard-pressed to take a narrow passage, which has no thoroughfare. Here, against a hoarding and decaying timber, he is brought to bay and tumbles down, lying gasping at his pursuer, who stands and gasps at him until the woman comes up. "Oh, you, Joe!" cries the woman. "What, have I found you at last?" "Joe!" repeats Alan, looking at him with attention. "Joe, stay, to be sure. I recollect this lad some time ago being brought before the coroner." "Yes, I see you once afore at the Inkwich," whimpers Joe. "What of that? Can't you never let such an unfortunate as me alone? Ain't I unfortunate enough for you yet? How unfortunate do you want me for to be? I've been achieved, first by one on you, and next by another on you, till I'm worried to skins and bones. The Inkwich warn't my fault. I done nothing. He was very good to me, he was. He was the only one I knowed to speak to as ever come across my crossing. It ain't very likely I should want him to be inkwitched. I only wish I was myself. I don't know why I don't go and make a hole in the water. I'm sure I don't." He says it with such a pitiable air, and his grimy tears appear so real, and he lies in the corner up against the hoarding, as like a growth of fungus produced there in neglect and impunity, that Alan Woodcourt is softened toward him. He says to the woman, "Miserable creature, what has he done?" To which she only replies, shaking her head at the prostrate figure, more amazedly than angrily, "Oh, you, Joe, I have found you at last." "What has he done?" says Alan. "Has he robbed you?" "No, sir, no, robbed me. He did nothing but what was kind-hearted by me, and that's the wonder of it. But he was all along with me, sir," says the woman, "down at St. Albans, ill, and a young lady, Lord bless her, for a good friend to me, took pity on him when I durstn't, and I took him home." Alan shrinks back from him with a sudden horror. "Yes, sir, yes, took him home, and made him comfortable. And like a thankless monster he ran away in the night, and never has been seen or heard of since, till I set eyes on him just now, and that young lady that was such a pretty dear caught his illness, lost her beautiful looks, and wouldn't hardly be known for the same young lady now if it wasn't for her angel temper, and her pretty shape, and her sweet voice. Do you know it, you ungrateful wretch? Do you know that this is all along of you, and of the goodness of you?" demands the woman, breaking into passionate tears. The boy, in rough sort, stunned by what he hears, falls to smearing his dirty forehead with his dirty palm, and to shaking from head to foot until the crazy hoarding against which he leans rattles. Alan restrains the woman merely by a quiet gesture, but effectively. "Richard told me," he falters. "I mean, I have heard of this. Don't mind me for a moment. I will speak presently." He turns away and stands for a while, looking out at the covered passage. When he comes back, he has recovered his composure, except that he contends against an avoidance of the boy, which is so very remarkable that it absorbs the woman's attention. "You hear what she says? But get up, get up!" Joe, shaking and chattering, slowly rises and stands after the manner of his tribe, in a difficulty sideways against the hoarding, resting one of his high shoulders against it, and covertly rubbing his right hand over his left, and his left foot over his right. "You hear what she says, and I know it's true. Have you been here ever since?" "Wishing I die if I seen Tom all alone till this blessed morning," replies Joe hoarsely. "Why have you come here now?" "I don't know how to do nothing, and I can't get nothing to do. I'm very poor and ill, and I thought I'd come back here when there weren't nobody about, and lay down and hide somewheres, as I knows on till arter dark, and then go and beg a trifle of Mr. Snagsby. He was always willing for to give me something, he was, though Mrs. Snagsby, she was always a-chivying on me, like everybody everywheres. Now tell me," proceeds Alan, making a strong effort to overcome his repugnance, going very near to him and leaning over him with an expression of confidence. "Tell me how it came about that you left that house when the good young lady had been so unfortunate as to pity you and take you home." Joe suddenly comes out of his resignation and excitedly declares, addressing the woman, that he never known about the young lady, that he never hearn about it, that he never went for to hurt her, that he would sooner have hurt his own self, that he'd sooner have had his unfortunate head chopped off than ever gone anigh her, and that she was very good to him, she was, conducting himself throughout as if in his poor fashion he really meant it, and winding up with some very miserable sobs. Alan Woodcourt sees that this is not a sham. He constrains himself to touch him. "Come, Joe, tell me." "No, I doesn't," says Joe, relapsing into a profile state. "I doesn't, or I would." "But I must know," returns the other. "All the same, come, Joe." After 2 or 3 such adjurations, Joe lifts up his head and says in a low voice, "Well, I'll tell you something. I was took away, in the night." "Ah." Very apprehensive of being overheard, Joe looks about him and even glances up some 10 feet at the top of the hoarding and through the cracks in it, lest the object of his distrust should be looking over or hidden on the other side. "Who took you away?" "I doesn't name him," says Joe. "I doesn't do it, sir. But I want it, but I want in the young lady's name, you know. You must. Trust me. No one else shall hear." "Ah, but I don't know," replies Joe, shaking his head fearfully. "As he don't hear." "Why, he is not in this place." "Oh, ain't he, though?" says Joe. "He's in all manner of places, at all onst." Alan looks at him in perplexity, but discovers some real meaning and good faith in the bottom of this bewildering reply. He patiently awaits an explicit answer, and Joe, more baffled by his patience than by anything else, at last desperately whispers a name in his ear. "Aye," says Alan. "Why, what had you been doing?" "Nothink, sir. Never done nothink to get myself into no trouble, 'cept in not moving on, and the ink which I'm a-moving on now to the burying ground. That's the move as I'm up to." No, we will try to prevent that." "But what did he do with you?" "Put me in on hospital," replies Joe, whispering, "till I was discharged, then give me a little money and says, 'Hook it. Nobody wants you here,' he says. 'You hook it. You go and tramp,' he says. You move on, he says. Don't let me ever see you nowheres within 40 miles of London, or you'll repent it. And he'll see me if I'm above ground. Alan considers a little, then remarks, turning to the woman, but keeping an encouraging eye on Joe. He is not so ungrateful as you suppose. He had a reason for going away, though it was an insufficient one.
Thank ye, sir, thank ye, exclaims Joe. There now, see how hard you was upon me? But only you tell the young lady what the gentleman says, and it's all right, for you was very good to me, and I knows it.
Now, Joe, says Alan, keeping his eye upon him, come with me, and I will find you a better place than this to lie down and hide in. If I take one side of the way, and you the other, and to avoid observation, you will not run away, I know very well, if you make me a promise.
I won't, not unless I was to see him a-coming, sir.
Very well, I take your word. Half the town is getting up by this time, and the whole town will be broad awake in another hour. Come along. Good day again, my young woman.
Good day again, sir, and I thank you kindly many times again.
Joe repeating,
Only you tell the young lady as I never went fur to hurt her, and what the gentleman says,
nods and shambles and shivers and takes his creeping way along after Alan Woodcourt, close to the houses on the opposite side of the street. In this order the two come out of Tom all Alone's into the broad rays of sunlight and the purer air. And that is the end of chapter 46.